Like, what do you think the underlying problem is that's causing a lot of this weight gain in couples?
This is not just overnight. It's most likely a slow build. It's probably due to stress, lack of sleep, lack of time to be creating a good environment. To start this process of helping your spouse to lose weight is to connect. And so something that we've been doing on a monthly basis is connecting, and we ask each other a series of questions.
And the big three questions was like, how am I doing as a father? How am I doing as a husband? And what is causing you stress? For the men, this is what I perceived. She's going to tell me to just quit my job. You know, she's like, I want you to just stop what you're doing, stop taking care of people, stop working out, and just spend 24 hours with me.
Yeah.
That was my perception. And then I go into that and she's like, I just want you to put the phone away for an hour. I was like, that's it? For men, it may seem like she's going to ask for the moon, but in reality, she just wants like a pebble. I remember me just looking at you for like a minute and you would freak out. You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You would be so scared. I was like, you told me I wanted to spend an hour with you. And she's like, yeah, but it's just like, it's different. You would cry in those moments. I would just like, I don't think you've looked at me for months.
Yeah.
For years. I don't think women talk about it that much. I think there's a lot of women that don't see their husband's eyes for years. Like, why do you think that was such a massive impact in your health and just our relationship in general?
You had to go Oprah on me.
I had to do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being seen, right? And so if you are not feeling good about your body and yourself, and your husband is not seeing you anymore, like, just how are you supposed to climb out of that? It can be really difficult. So the difference is, wow, when you actually like see me and are present with me, I feel so much better about myself.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about telling your spouse they needed to lose weight, but you just don't know how to do it? Or two, you fear that it might cause a stress in your relationship? What if I told you there is a framework you can follow that can increase your chances to do the dirty? Or two, it might cause a stress in your relationship that you might have to file divorce. Today, my wife is going to have a conversation about how to do this in a way where it's successful. So I'm pumped to have this conversation because it's a touchy subject. And if I do this conversation wrong, guys, this might be my last episode with my wife. But hopefully it serves you guys. Here we go.
Okay. This is going to be fun, I think.
All right. So before we really dive into the framework that you've created, I'm so pumped that you created a framework around this, and I kind of just did the touching pieces. Normally it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Let's talk about let's go about what not to do. And I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah. And these are not examples because you've done this in the past. Yeah. However, we've been together 10 plus years, and my body has changed quite a bit going through pregnancy, postpartum. So I think that's why this was easier for me to come up with a framework, thinking through what I've experienced myself.
Yeah.
And then also what I've had a lot of clients ask me, and you've also had a lot of clients ask you, which is also from more of the males who have been asking you.
For sure.
So I think this will be exciting to go through today. So basically, to start with what not to do, I think what's really interesting is if you're too direct about this, right? Most likely when I have been overweight, I know that I am. So if you would have come up to me and said something like let's say we're eating out at a restaurant together and you're like, hey, are you supposed to be eating those carbs right now?
Yeah.
Devastated. So
that's going to cause some problems really fast.
That's going to cause some problems. Or potentially the way that you ask it as well when asking me if you want to work out.
Hmm.
So I actually I actually had your dad ask me this.
Yeah.
Not to throw your dad under the bus, but yeah, when I was about 5 weeks postpartum and your family came to visit me and I was standing with your dad and he was like, "Oh, someone needs to go back to the gym."
Which traumatized you for a little
That
bit.
traumatized me for a long time.
Hmm.
And yeah, that did not help me. So it doesn't help to be that blunt and that
Yeah.
straightforward, because if someone is overweight, they're already uncomfortable in their body. I already
Hmm.
knew, like, yes, that would be wonderful if I could lose some of this weight. I feel extremely uncomfortable in my body.
Yeah.
So there is much more delicate ways that we're going to be talking about it. What are some other examples of what not to
Yeah.
do?
One of the examples, and I've ran through this play a few times in my life, but I've never said it to you because I fear that it would perceive it the wrong way, is like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to start going to the gym with me?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I advise not to do something like that, if you're a male and you're doing something like that, is because they would perceive it in an entirely different way. When someone would ask, if I was to ask you that, what would you think?
Yeah, and I would think that you were thinking that I was looking a little chunky. And we don't typically work out together, so that
Yeah.
would have been like a red flag if you're like, "Hey, let's go together." Like you're going to
Hmm.
watch me and make sure that I'm working out, versus some of the other techniques that we'll talk about, which is just giving somebody like time and space to go do a workout if that's what they would like to do. But yeah, if
Exactly.
you're like, "Hey, I think we should do some burpees together today,"
Hmm.
it's going to be suspicious in my mind.
Exactly. And it really creates a little bit of stress, even though you're coming from a good place. They just perceive it in an entirely different manner
Yeah, you
for the
have to
most
be
part.
delicate. I will say last week when you brought up this topic, that
Hmm.
we should do this topic, do you
Yeah.
remember what I thought?
Oh yeah. You immediately thought that it was like, you need to go lose weight, and I was like, no, 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 that's not the scenario. And for the gentleman out there, it's such a touchy topic that even if you bring up, I didn't even have that perception that you needed to lose weight, but I wanted to give the audience some form of framework that they can utilize, and you've perceived it as like, oh, you're telling me I need to lose weight.
100%. So even, yeah. So it's very delicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then another one, and I wanted to think of it another way. Like, what are some of the other wrong ways to do it? Is if you were eating like a bag of popcorn and I just gave you the judgy eyes, or I like
Yeah.
huffed and just like kind of rolled my eyeballs and walked away. Probably not the best scenario. Why would that not be a good scenario?
Yeah, I feel like when I've been overweight, I'm already judging myself. So I will
Hmm.
already read into body language that's probably not there.
Yeah.
Like if I feel that you're judging me, it's actually probably just me judging me. But
Hmm.
certainly, if you are very overtly, if you had been very obvious about it or
Yeah.
making comments or, oh, that's what you're going to be eating, or just um, having like small, like micro aggressions,
Hmm.
looking at my food or seeing me maybe being inactive, then I would feel judged for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another one just came up to mind is
Hmm.
just like having a random conversation. Is like, hey, by the way, I signed you up with a trainer to train 3 times a week. It starts next week.
Yeah. Without
Out
like,
of the blue.
yeah, without asking if I wanted that, what,
Yeah.
yeah, and just
Just throw it out on the
assuming.
whim.
Hmm.
That's really quick way to create some fights really fast.
Yeah,
So,
don't do that.
so those are some of the don't do's. But let's go into the framework that you created, because I think it's a really cool framework. I think we can add an entirely different value on this topic because the ones that we've watched were very similar. But I want to go over your first part of this framework. And before we really dive into this framework, like, what do you think the underlining underlining problem is that's causing a lot of this weight gain in couples.
Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with stress. And you can probably back me up on this with the clients that you've been seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But most likely, this is not just overnight. It's most
Yeah.
likely a slow build. And it's probably due to stress, lack of sleep, and lack of time to be creating a good environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I want to ask you as well, how frequently have you been asked from men or from women that
Yeah.
you've been working with about
This
this
similar
same question?
concept.
Like, how can I encourage my spouse to start losing weight?
Yeah, I like how you asked that question because I've gotten that question so many times. I just never had a concrete enough answer. And it normally happens somewhere around like 12 weeks where they started to lose the weight and
Mm-hmm.
they've now been aware of this massive disconnection or this massive gap where now they've lost 30, 40 pounds and their wife or their husband is still the same,
Yeah.
and
What was the
yeah,
advice that you gave him?
I knew my only advice was just to keep going
Yeah.
because that's the like, one. I wouldn't be like, just tell her to go hire me. Like that's not, I just never, I always thought that was just uncomfortable. It would have created more stress, both with my client and both also with their spouse.
Mm-hmm.
It just never really made sense to me. So this is my opportunity to give you guys a more concrete way to do this and a framework that you can follow that can be less friction. I think there still is friction, though, but hopefully it can really serve much better way.
Yeah, I think so too. And it was fun that we have been chatting about this in the last week, thinking about the number of times that we have been asked and then trying to look at what we've done ourselves. So, in my framework that I came up with, the number one thing to do to start this process of helping your spouse to lose weight is to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, something that we've been doing on a monthly basis is connecting, and we ask each other a series of questions. And this, how many?
It's just three for the
Yeah, it's
most
just
part. Three
three.
big
How
questions.
how long have we been doing this? About a year?
About a year now.
Yeah. And I think it could have been helpful to be doing this since at the beginning of our relationship, but
Yeah.
it's been wonderful to do this relation. Thank you,
son.
Lukey.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful way for us to start to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are those three questions?
Before we dive into those three questions, we had some hard conversations because one of the things that you said was you communicate better with your team and you don't communicate with me at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions that I quarterly do with my coaches and sometimes monthly is, how am I doing as a boss? How am I doing as a leader? Right? And how am I doing as a friend? In your
Right.
process? And then they would score me, and then we would build this amazing cadence together, and we will build each other up. We'd have pretty amazing relationships. And then you sent like a questionnaire for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. How come I'm not connecting with my wife in a regular cadence just like I would be connecting in my business? And we were like, let's just try it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do it. And we started to implement them. And there was a bunch of questions, but then we eventually kind of trimmed them down into the big three.
Yes.
And the big three questions was like, how am I doing as a father? How am I doing as a husband? And what is causing you stress? Those are like the big three questions.
Yep. And we rate each other. So, how am I doing as a wife? And then that's on a rating scale of 1 to 10. And then, how am I doing as a mother? And then, what is worrying you? What are you anxious about?
100%,
And so maybe you can tell too, because we just did this yesterday. We like to do it in the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
And so we just did our questions yesterday, but maybe you can tell as well about the setup. Like, what is the setting where this should be happening. Where should these 3 questions be
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah. Like that framework of like, where should this be happening? When should this be happening? What
Mhm.
are the actual questions and why does this work so well?
Mhm.
Right. So if you were going to have this particular conversation, I think it's important not to have it when you guys are both extremely stressed.
Mhm.
Don't have the conversation when your wife is putting all the lunches together, filling out Lucas's medical papers, and then she has a call. Like, you need to find an ideal time where both of you guys are not overly stressed to have this conversation.
Mm.
And our recommendation, because we've done it a few practices already and it hasn't been perfect, is
Mhm.
ideally it should be been done like somewhere in the morning.
Yeah.
Somewhere where the stresses are not super crazy. Or 2, if you can create some type of date. Like we've done this at a lunch, or like we both had lunch. It was like, let's go out to lunch on Friday and let's do our monthly checkup.
Yeah. And I think it was important because if I remember correctly, the first time that we did it, we put it on the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put things on my calendar, then I prepare for them. So I knew to like fill my cup because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have these questions that you're going to be asking me or potentially be getting feedback that is hard to hear. And what do I need to feel like? I need to have my cup really full to make sure that I can really be in a state of openness to hear you and not to be defensive and to really take to heart what you've said, because this conversation can go really wrong if you are not in that state. And so, like for me, that's working out, making sure that I just know that I'm not going to drain myself with other tasks before we have this meeting. And so that has been really helpful for me to come to that. Like yesterday, we had both worked out. We had both done our own thing for a little bit in the day before we had this meeting. So I knew going into it, like I was ready to hear feedback if you had something to tell me.
Yeah. And one thing that we both agreed on was like no 7s.
Yes.
Yeah. Why no 7s?
So, and I always try and do 7s too. So I tried to give you a 7 yesterday and you reminded me, hey, no 7s because that's too safe. Like it's either an 8 or it's either a 6. And it does make a big difference.
It's a huge difference. Yeah.
So like you do have to, don't like tiptoe as well, is what I feel like. You're always like, just give it to me straight. Like, come on, like you're always so ready for these meetings and your cup is so full. I don't think you've ever been defensive, which is nice. And so now that we've done it a few times, it also creates that trust that we both know how to create the safe container where we can have these discussions. And I know that you'll actually call me out if you think that I'm just being too nice. And you're like, don't give me a 7. Come on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay.
Yeah. You tried to give me a 7. I was like, no, there's no 7s.
Yeah.
And I say no 7s for me because if it's a 6, I know I got to take immediate action. Like how quickly can I get this to an 8, 9, or 10?
Right.
But if it's an 8, I'm like, okay, I can prioritize different areas maybe as a father or maybe as a husband. Because it's really hard to focus. If you have 2 7s on both of those scores, it makes it like, what should I focus on the most? And at the end of the day, you don't have a whole ton of energy sometimes to be able to dedicate to improve both of those.
Right.
Right. There might be seasons where you're going to be an amazing father, and there are going to be seasons where you're going to be an amazing husband, or maybe on lucky times you could be amazing at both. And I think it's a really, really good way to just prioritize. If you're focusing, it's like that whole term. If you're focusing on 2 rabbits, you're not going to get any of them.
Yeah.
Really prioritize one. So I really like that. And and that's, I mean, we ran through it. I want to give them an example of kind of what it was, and just so they get an idea what this is going to look like.
Okay.
So how am I doing as a father? 1 being non-existent, poor, or 10 like the best father in the world.
An 8.
Why? Or how can I get that 8 to a 9?
And so, yeah, I remember yesterday kind of telling you why you were at an 8 first and then saying the things that you could do better, which we identified that I was hoping that you would pick up Lucas at least one day a week because that would help me out. And I think that's a great time to connect with him. And I specified that you can't be listening to a podcast or doing work when you pick him up.
Yeah.
And if we also want to start Lucas in jujitsu, so looking into having that also happen on that same pickup date.
Yeah.
And that, like, to me, would definitely take it to a 10.
Yeah, but initially you said you wanted him to do 2. So just to be clear. But then I was like, oh, I can't pick him up more than once because Wednesday's my only half day.
Correct.
So we're like, okay, because I feel like there's parents that are like, I want you to pick him up 3 times, but I can't. I have clients those 3 nights. I'd have to cancel those clients or do something so extravagant. But so just creating that flow. But even me agreeing to 1 day, what did that create for you?
Yeah, I forgot. I did ask you for 2. And then I forgot because when you said, okay, I can't do that with my schedule, but is there something else that I can do instead? And then it made me really excited. We've been thinking about having Lucas do jujitsu for a while.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, that would be awesome. Like if you could also do that task, because I think I'm going to just be too tired for that. And I want that connection for the 2 of you. And so, I right away forgot that I had asked you for 2 days actually. So that is a good example of how those conversations can have some back and forth. And I didn't get upset with you because the way that you were able to just say, I can't do that with my schedule, but
I can do at
I
least
can
this.
do, like, what else could it be?
Right.
And then I hadn't thought of that before. And if we had never had that talk, that wouldn't have come up.
And there'd be this built up resentment that he doesn't care.
Right.
Right. But I do care. And a lot of times that hour that you gain back gives you an opportunity to just recover, to relax. I mean, you can use it for some version of exercise. But what I've noticed in the past, remember we've had this conversation and you said, I just need an hour to myself where I can just like read a book. I want to go to a restaurant and just like hang out by the fireplace. Yeah. And I was like, done. I'm going to go watch Lucas for an hour. You go do your thing. Right. And give like the audience, like what kind of, what did it do for you? Even just that hour, even though it wasn't exercise, what did that hour do for you?
Yeah, so this was a few years ago that I had asked Royce for basically a date with myself. And I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I wanted to sit by the fireplace. I was super excited about the food, and I brought a book to read. And just having that alone time in that space to just sit there, and I didn't feel rushed. I think you said, like, I asked for an hour, but I knew that you guys were not doing anything for the rest of the night. So if I happened to do more, then it was fine. Yeah. And an hour went by and I felt so refreshed. Yeah. And I think I probably sat there for a little bit longer because what ended up happening, I was reading, and usually reading for me is kind of a way to like numb out a little bit. But after that, which always happens to my brain, if I'm able to have like quiet space and just to relax a little bit, and I don't have Lucas asking me to make him food every 2 minutes, I'm able to become really creative. So I remember coming away from that really having some good ideas about how I could take care of myself. So it didn't build up to that point again where I was like, oh, like I just need to be by myself. And so I can't remember specifically what I came up with, but I know that that was so pivotal, like that I got that time to be thinking through what I just needed for myself. Yeah. And I think all moms probably need that. Yeah.
The first time you did that, you came in with different ideas. You were like, hey, I think I'm going to go sign up for this gym.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, really close. I can put Lucas there. I can do my workouts because you were reflecting back on where you felt the best. Right. And it just gave you space to just look at opportunities where you felt the greatest. And I was like, I didn't force you to do anything. All I just did was like, yeah, let's do it then.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about beforehand what I needed or what I was going to be thinking about. But when I have time to myself, I do tend to think about that, especially when I'm stressed. All of a sudden, when I'm in a quiet space, I will think through and question, what am I doing? Is there any wiggle room for me to be able to fit in? Sometimes it's not the working out. Sometimes it's, I haven't even seen my friends in a few weeks. Like, how can I get friend time?
Mm-hmm.
But that for me is such a cup filler that usually snowballs into other healthy habits,
Yeah.
because maybe I'm actually going to meet my friend for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
or we're going to go take a meal prep class together, something that I've done before with my friends. And I don't think of those things when I'm highly stressed.
And I don't think anyone thinks about those things. I think a lot of times when a couple comes to me and be like, how do I get my wife to lose weight?
Mm-hmm.
They're addressing just the eating problem, but what they're not addressing is how you're helping each other reduce stress.
Yeah.
And if you have built up stress, what I typically see, at least the clients that come in,
Mm-hmm.
they're coping in some way. And a lot of times we cope really easily with food.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stressed, they're coping with food. They're mad, they're coping with food. They're alone, they're coping with food. And then you have this residual gain of weight over the course of being 5 years together, 10 years together, 20 years together.
Mm-hmm.
And then by that time, it's like it's a hard conversation,
Yeah.
or it's too late,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I think that's like the biggest thing that we've seen together, that it's not the carbs they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the pizzas, the popcorns, it's not the ice cream at night. It's something deeper.
Yeah.
And that deeper is the deeper connection, and how you're handling life together is a huge component. So I really wanted to bring that up. All right, let's do the second question really quick. How am I doing as a husband? I think it's important to differentiate those,
Right.
because it gives you different plans. So how am I doing as a husband?
An 8.
Okay.
And I remember that when we did this, I was bringing up specific examples. So I've seen you trying really hard to connect. I was just on vacation. And
Mhm.
so we were on vacation together for a week, but I was also away from you for 2 weeks, and we haven't ever been away from
3
each
weeks.
other.
It was, oh yeah, it was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I gave you an 8 because you were doing great calling me, still staying connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then on vacation, which is always hard for you to take a vacation, but I felt like you did a really good job, like connecting with my family, spending time with me, clearing work responsibilities so that you could actually be present.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
So, by the way, guys, if you're watching this right now, you're like, dang, he's the perfect husband. But there were a few times when we've had this conversation where I scored like 3s and 4s.
Yep.
And those 3s and 4s were such an eye-opening experience for me, because it was just like simple things. Like one of the things was like, if you just kept your phone in the car for an hour, you would score a 9.
Oh,
And I
that was
like,
a big one.
I was like, what? I would score a 9 if I just kept my phone in there? He's
Yep.
like, yes, because you would be texting your clients, you'd be watching a podcast, like you would be doing something work related, and all I need is an hour, because Lucas is to be sleeping in about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Just connect with me for an hour, play with Lucas for an hour. And it made such an impact for our family that I literally went from 4
Mm-hmm.
to like 9.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think what helped on those ones where I knew I was going to rate you kind of low is I already had some ideas of what that looked like. I think it's really hard to have feedback if someone tells you you're just doing a shit job,
Yeah.
and they have nothing to give you in terms of
How do I get
ideas for
better?
how they could do better.
Yeah.
So that second part is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember thinking through, and that's another thing, obviously, setting up a space and a time to have these conversations, but also to pre-think through what you're going to say. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's all I'm actually looking for. And sometimes that's hard to pick apart. Like, what
Yeah.
are we actually looking for? I would say that's the same thing when we're thinking about, like, man, I wish my spouse was
Yeah.
able to lose weight? What are you actually looking for? Are
Exactly.
you looking to connect more? Are you actually feeling that there's that loss of connection, the physical intimacy, the like flirtatiousness of the
Hmm.
relationship, you being able to do stuff active together? Are you just feeling like she's so stressed out that you can't have conversations with her? So it's helpful in this
Hmm.
connection part because then I'm able to say to you, this is what you would need to get to that 9 or 10. And
Hmm.
then maybe you can share, how did that feel to get that feedback, and how do you think that that could help people?
For the men, this is what I perceived. Having that conversation, and then I was going to ask that question. She's going to tell me to just quit my job. She's like, I want you to just stop what you're doing, stop taking care of people, stop working out, and just spend 24 hours with me.
Yeah.
That was my perception. And then I go into that, and she's like, I just want you to put the phone away for an hour. I was like, that's it?
Yeah.
And I think that is one of these like magical benefits to have these cadences. For men, it may seem like she's going to ask for the moon,
Mm-hmm.
but in reality, she just wants like a pebble
Yeah.
of you, which is like, and it makes you just realize you're like, that's it, and it's going to have this massive impact. And I think there's that disconnect of what we think that our spouse needs and what they really want is so small,
Mm-hmm.
and it has massive grand ripple effects over time. And it's really interesting because I remember me just looking at you for like a minute, and you would freak out. You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You would be so scared. I was like, you told me I want to spend an hour with you. And she's like, yeah, but it's just like, it's different. It forces you to smile. And a lot of times you would cry in those moments. I would just like, I don't think you've looked at me for months,
Yeah.
for years, just with that little thing. And it just creates this connection.
Yep. That's the biggest part.
Do you see how she's crying? This is the
No, I'm
impact.
not going to cry.
It's too late.
You already know when I start to, so I feel like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm going to pull it back. I'm okay. I don't need to
Yeah.
cry today.
But why is that I don't think women talk about it that much. I think there's a lot of women that don't see their husband's eyes for years. Like, why do you think that was such a massive impact in your health and just our relationship in general?
You had to go Oprah on me.
I had to do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being seen,
Hmm.
right? And so if you are not feeling good about your body and yourself, and your husband is not seeing you anymore,
Hmm.
like, just how are you supposed to climb out of that? It can
Hmm.
be really difficult. So,
Yeah.
um the difference is, wow, when you actually like see me and are present with me, I feel so much better about myself.
Yeah. So powerful.
It's energizing. And then I want to take care of myself. When you give me more attention, I just only want to take care of myself more so that I continue to get that attention from you. And yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you're sharing this because I don't think there's a lot of topics. A lot of times the content we were watching it. I was like, they're only seeing it from one perspective. What if they see it from two?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I started to notice. I started to pick up on that. Every time I say something to you, every time I look at you, you take care of yourself more.
Right.
In the past, my solution to it was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna look at her. Maybe she's gonna get fitter if I don't look at her, if I don't spend time. I remember we had those fights where I was like, I'm just not gonna talk to her, and she's gonna know.
Right.
And
I'm
it's
just going to read your mind magically.
and it doesn't work that way, guys. And guys, I'm telling you, if you want your wife to lose weight, spend 5 minutes to just look at her and really like look at her from a place of gratitude and look at her from a place of acceptance and like, dude, this girl is doing so much. and you're still, it's still foreign to you. I'll have moments I was like, I'm gonna go 5 minutes strong.
Oh my gosh, I know. You look at me
Yeah.
sometimes and I'm like, whoa, what's happening?
Yeah, what's going on?
I'll actually say sometimes like, why are you giving me so much love right now? Like I
Yeah.
can just really feel it from you. And
Yeah.
then I don't know what to do with it for a second because I'm also in whatever busy mom land that I'm
Yeah.
in or work land. And so then it brings me into the present like, whoa, okay. Hello,
Yeah.
husband.
Yeah.
This is nice. And so I love when you unexpectedly do that. And
Yeah.
that's something that reminds me like I'm not just a mom.
Right. This is getting super Oprah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I got to reel it in here.
Oh man, this was unexpected, but this is real, guys. This is what's happening. Okay, so let's go into the final question because I think it's the magic sauce, but obviously the other two are magic sauces for sure. Is what's causing you the biggest stress? And asking them that is so important. What was causing you the biggest stress for when we had that conversation last night? What was the biggest stress for you?
What did I say?
I think it was.
Oh, just I wanted because I've been starting to work out in the mornings.
Oh yeah,
We had already somewhat solved this,
yeah.
but I started to work out at 5:30 in the morning and there wasn't really other times for me to be able to go by myself. And so now that I had my first week of doing that and it felt so good, my stress was just that it would be taken away. That
Yeah.
like you wouldn't know how important it had been and that you would schedule an early client or that
Yeah.
you would last minute be like, oh, nope, I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah.
you can't do that today.
I just
And so
blocked out
that
my
was,
schedule.
yeah. So that was where I was just saying, like, hey, it went so well. Like, I really appreciate that we were able to coordinate on that
Yeah.
and I need that time. So, whatever you can do to continue to block out your time so that you can handle
Yeah.
morning, getting Lucas ready for school so that I can go work out. Like, I wanted to make sure you knew that I appreciated that and that
Yeah.
my stress was that you were going to take that away now that it was going so
Yeah.
well.
And it's huge, guys. The ripple effect was massive for me. I came in at lunchtime and I was like, this whole place is clean.
Yeah.
This is weird. Right. And one of my love languages, I think that's an important book, is learning your love languages, is mine's act of service. And man, you came in full. And I was like, I walked in after my first half. I have two halves during my workday, my first 8 hours and my second 8 hours. Right. And I came in and I was like, oh, this is great. This place is super clean. In any environments where it's clean, I get super charged up. And that was just one of the residual impacts. But my intention was just like, okay, she wants an hour and she wants to do that. I'm going to do it. That's it. You know, there's no return. I didn't expect any return, but I just knew that that was like a massive impact for you, that I was like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So there's that, again, more ripple effects. Because if I didn't, if in the scenario where I was like, no, I'm going to take more clients and we need to do this, where's your wife going to work out? Where's she going to find creative time to really take care of herself? It's very hard. It's very hard to do that. And I think some of the biggest problems where spouses start to gain weight is they don't help each other out. And sometimes it's just simple as, you've worked out 3 times, you know, and it's like, that's it. I just had to say no to one client.
Yeah.
No morning clients. So you can do that for yourself, which was huge.
Yeah. And you mentioned the clean house. So I had so much energy from working out in the morning, feeling so good that I accomplished more in my day.
Yeah.
And that does kind of lead us into the second part of the framework. Are we ready to go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the second part, so the first part was connect.
Yeah, create a connection cadence. Really quick, they should do this monthly.
Yes, exactly. Those 3 questions monthly in a safe place.
Calendar it out if you can.
Put it in the calendar, be ready for it, and be ready to take action and not be defensive. And that connection can lead to that person feeling supported, so that in turn, they might finally be able to take actions that they've been wanting to that would lead to them being more confident and having weight loss.
Exactly. I love you too, buddy. There's my son.
I love you. Maybe he saw me crying.
Yeah, probably.
So part 2 to the framework is creating an environment in your house. And what does that look like? And so let me explain. If you are trying to go cook a meal and all the dishes are in the sink, there's nothing clean, how do you feel? Like, do you want to make anything?
Not really, no.
Yeah. When there is no food and you go into the refrigerator and half of the food is expired and there's nothing really there to even put together a meal. Like, how does that make?
I'm ordering Uber Eats.
Exactly.
For sure. Hey guys, we are finally accepting students in our Weight Loss Academy. In this program, we are teaching you the skill set, the mindset, the tool sets to be able to not only lose weight over the next 12 weeks, but keep it off for a lifetime. If you find yourself struggling to shed pounds or you're regaining the weight after dieting, this academy is designed for you. Now, click on the show notes below so you can join our wait list and you will be the first to know when our curriculum begins. Now, back to the show. Peace.
So I've been thinking about creating an environment that actually, as a family, inspires you to just be healthy together. And one of the things that we did during COVID, because we had a little bit of time on our hands, but this was so impactful. I had been watching Marie Kondo and I read her book, The Life-Changing, I think, Skills of Tidying Up. And what's so fascinating is in the beginning of her book, she does talk about when people follow her method of cleaning their homes, that they actually lose weight. And she said she doesn't know why. She's not a researcher or a scientist.
Yeah.
She has nothing to do with weight loss. She's just this cute lady who has a great framework to be able to clean your house and have it be tidy. But it was true that when we started to go through and do her method, there was a sense that the house was lighter. And we went through, and I think you personally donated 10 bags of clothes. I think I had more. I probably, and definitely for Lucas, I had not gone through the things that he had outgrown. There was toys that he had outgrown. Every single part of our house looked different after that. But one of the most impactful things that I realized and I started to encourage my clients to do was get a kitchen that you want to cook in. Like, that is huge. If you don't have a system in place, if you have, how many coffee mugs did we have?
35.
At least. And how many of those coffee mugs did you leave around the house?
At least 34.
Like, every day I would find 5 of your coffee mugs that were at whatever, half full, 3/4 full.
Here's what's funny. Then I'm like, babe, can you make me some food? There's 34 mugs in there.
Yeah. I'm like,
where am I going to make food?
Exactly. It was creating these huge just blocks for me. And it was so hard for me to want to.
So much friction.
Yeah. A lot of friction that was unnecessary. So, So maybe you could talk about what we eventually decided on. Because I didn't just do it on my own either. But I did do like kind of a first sweep through of all of the things in the kitchen. And then we had a conversation together like, okay, what do we actually need? It's just you and me and Lucas. So maybe you could talk about how much we actually kept in the kitchen.
Yeah. There was a framework. We were just doing some gardening this morning. And I think it sums up pretty much what we're about to talk about in this creating this environment. I had an earlier conversation with one of my clients and we did the whole metabolism thing where he can improve, and it was his NEAT activity. We'll put a link on for 4 ways where you can burn calories. And we identified that his NEAT can be much better. And I told him, I was like, find a place in the house that needs love and then work really hard to clean it up. And then our area today was the backyard.
Yeah.
And then there was this particular bush that we just never really took care of, and it was a rose bush. And for those of you guys that know what I'm talking about, just be like, I know what you're talking about. Rose bushes are one of the hardest things to clean up because one, there's thorns everywhere. And if you don't like trim it, it goes like this. And you can't clean the leaves underneath because you have all these pointy things that are attacking you.
Right.
So the first thing that we did, at least what I did, was like, I just got to trim away, right? Let's just trim away all of the stuff so we can get to the actual stems. The second step was like, cut the stems. And then the final piece was like, take all of the leaves, which was an abundant amount of leaves. And then we scooped that up and then we threw it away. The trim away component to this story is exactly what you said. Like the first thing we did was like, let's just throw away things we don't use and don't need.
Or are broken.
Or
there
are
was
broken.
so many things that were broken or missed pieces.
Yeah. Or like plates. We're like, no, that plate's still useful. I was like, no, we have a lot of plates.
Yeah.
So we just threw away things that were in the way that we didn't use. And then eventually, like you start to get creative. You're like, why do we have 35 coffee mugs? How many times do we really need it? How many coffee mugs do you need? I need one.
Right.
I need one. I was like, cool, let's just have 2 coffee mugs. Right. And then it was like, we had how many utensils? Another 30 plus utensils.
So many. And none of them matched.
None of them matched.
We didn't throw everything away we donated, but yeah.
My wife donated. I threw things away.
Bryce is really bad at that.
I love it. It's like my favorite thing. Like it doesn't matter what it is. I'm sure someone else can use it, but for some reason I feel so good when I just throw things away. But anyways, we eventually started to really identify exactly what we needed. And then we had pans that we would never use, right? We had machines that we would never use. We were like, I've never used this. Have you used this? So we started getting to just the bare minimums. And that's like the STEM side of things. Another thing that we started to notice was like, once we started cleaning, he was like, Royce, we have 4 rooms we don't use.
Yeah.
And I was
that
like,
was a very big house that you had originally bought and lived in with roommates.
Yeah.
And we just didn't need that much space.
Yeah, we didn't need that much space. And you were like, we should sell this house. And I freaked out. But then selling that house changed our entire cash flow, right? And now you have an opportunity to get a yoga membership or to get a trainer or to buy your favorite yoga stuff and your cleaning stuff. So that opened up a bunch of stuff. Another thing was we just started to see things in terms of our financials. It was like, you drive everywhere. You go to the west side, you go to St. Rose, you do this sometimes twice in one day. That's like, how many times are you filling up your gas? And I was like, once a week. How much is once a week? It's at least $80 to $100.
Yeah.
He was like, what, let's just get an electric vehicle. And I was like, no, no electric vehicles. And then now we both have electric vehicles, and I've never been to the gas station for months now, you know, and now it's like, oh gosh, I have $100 extra a week. What can we do with that 100? We could buy better food, right? We could buy more memberships and training and coaching, right? It just starts to open up all of these things because we're trimming things away. We're cutting the big stems, which was some of those financial burdens for us, right? And then at some point, we start flirting. We're just like, hey, you looking good, right? Or you're doing the same thing. And again, this is where the abundance starts to kick in. Fitness becomes easier. You're starting to prep a bunch more. You're cooking a lot more meals. You know, I only have 1 coffee mug. You know, it's like
we're getting time back.
We're getting time back. Yeah. We're getting time back. We're getting space back. And that time, like something that I want to tell you guys right now is like, anything you own will own you. But here's what's cool. If you start to get rid of things, other things will come back. And I just never really understood that. And that's why I'm addicted to giving things away and deleting things that are not needed, because I don't know what's going to come back to me. We didn't know that all this time and space and energy was going to come back to us, that we started to work out more, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Which is great. So like that is essentially the framework. Trim things away to create a good environment, like what's unnecessary. The second thing is you'll eventually, once you start trimming things away, you can start seeing the big stems that you can remove.
Yeah, and creating processes that make it easier for you all as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I think is huge in that component is you mentioned the financial, and
Yeah.
that's a good like that's a good way to be having these conversations with your spouse. Hey, we keep eating out a lot,
Yeah.
and how can we set that up better? And what's interesting is what I found with some of the clients that I've worked with, and maybe you have found the same thing, but men and women can be eating the exact same way, but the female is the one who's gaining the weight. But
Right.
there's still the male who is, partaking and eating the fast food or the convenience food because no one has any time and stress is high. But
Yeah.
because of, lack of sleep or maybe more stress or hormonal issues,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the wife is the one who's like gaining the weight. So
Right.
husbands, like if you want to start having these conversations about finances and time and money, these all are related to health.
Yes.
And they can all help so that as a family, you're becoming healthier. So looking at what is our budget, what is our time that we have, I always ask this, who's the one who is, meal prepping, who's the one who's cooking, who's doing groceries. And if that is all on one person,
they have zero time.
Yeah, that's probably going to create some sort of conflict where they get to that place where the kitchen isn't clean and they're like, hey, I'm just going to have to do something fast. So I love that analogy of the tree because it's like trim first to see what's happening, but then get to the root problem of like, we just don't have a good system. We don't have specific days that we go and get groceries. We don't have specific meals that we actually like as a family. And we're way overspending on fast food and convenience foods. And that can be something that you work on together as a family.
Yeah. And you might not see it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And in like the time component, that is one of the biggest objections and hurdles for people. They don't have time. This is the quickest way you can. And an example of that is like laundry. Imagine if you have 50 shirts and you had the 50 shirts and then you're like, but what if you only had like 4 shirts? 3 of the shirts are messy. Now you have to like wash it. So it's like it creates time back, I feel like a lot of times. Because now we're like, when you have too much stuff,
you have to clean it all. You have to take care of it. And then when you don't, it takes a lot longer to clean up. So like now that we've downsized in our house, it doesn't take much time for us to clean compared to, oh my gosh, our last house. It was so overwhelming for me to even have a place to start. And every room that I would clean, Lucas would go behind me and mess up because we just had so much excess space.
Yeah.
And so, making sure that you are trimming away all of the unnecessary things does give you much more time back to be able to work on yourself.
Yeah, it's so good. I've even gotten to, we've donated so much of his toys. That was like one of the biggest problems was like we're just constantly cleaning his toys. And then we eventually were like, what stuff is he not using? Let's just get rid of that. Those are some easy trim aways. Right. So, man, cleaning for me is like an energy zapper, even though it feels good when it's clean. Same thing with you. So if you find yourself cleaning all the time, what's left? You have no energy left to work out. Right. So I'm glad we brought that up. That is the creating the environment. So create a connection cadence, create an environment suitable for you guys to both to become healthier.
Exactly.
And let's get to the third one.
And the third one is to get coaching. And this is individually. And maybe you can speak to this too. I want to hear some examples from you, but how many times have you been asked this question of like, I need my spouse to lose weight? And how frequently is that coming up? And then like, why was coaching an important part for the success of that couple?
100%. So one of our big principles was like, if you want to start giving advice, to your spouse, you need to start getting advice first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then take that advice and utilize it. So in a nutshell, you got to lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to start there, because oftentimes we'll get a client, they'll lose 30, 40, 50 pounds, and then it's much easier for them. A lot of times it's the other couple, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
They'll ask for the advice. And you're like, well, I just hired this coach. This is what he has me do.
Mm-hmm.
What's really cool, I'm drawing from some of the couples that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and they've done it right. And I'm just like, they didn't tell their wife to train with me.
Yeah.
What they did was like, you should hire a trainer that he has, and you should go talk to her. Don't talk to my trainer.
Yeah, like find your own trainer.
Yeah, find your own trainer, find your own coach. And I think that was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it just creates a safe space. It was like, they're just good at what they do.
Right.
Right.
And then I love that you said too that it's like you've seen people who didn't just lead with saying to their spouse, like, you need to get a trainer, or like what we said in the beginning, don't just book that without going to the person. Lead by example and wait for your spouse to notice too. Like, okay, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And can I do something like that? We've done that before in our relationship where I've seen you doing coaching and I'm noticing there's this change about you.
Who
or
is this guy? He's waking up at 5 in the morning.
I'm like, okay, what are you doing? And then I'm curious. That's coming from a way different place of like judgment and shame. If you're like, look what I'm doing. And like, what are you doing over there? You're not doing any growth. You're not doing any learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to encourage me.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I love that. What other examples of couples or what things have you maybe seen the benefits of them getting coaching?
Yeah, the biggest one is like, and then we'll put another link here. It's like every person is different.
Yes.
Right? Every personality is different. And what Keith and I talked about on like finding your perfect gym, it could also mean finding your perfect program for you to lose weight, is to understand your type.
Yes.
And type is an acronym. T stands for what's your time budget. You might not have a lot of time. I might have a lot of time. Those things are going to be important to understand. Y is like, what is your personality? Right? Do you love a lot of people? Do you love no people? Do you want one-on-one attention? Do you want multiple attention? I think those are extremely important to understand. Another one is like, what's your profession? Like everyone has it, or maybe you don't have a profession. If you have a profession that is paying at a high salary, or maybe you're just a student, that's going to change the dynamic of what you need, right? And then the last one is, what is your environment? What if you're spending 8 hours out of your day sitting at a desk? Maybe you need to go out. You need to go to the nature. Or maybe your profession or your environment that you work in is you're a construction worker. Maybe you don't want to spend another hour outside. You need to go in and do some type of AC environment or cooling down environment, de-stressing. Like your partner is going to be very different unless you work the exact same way. But a lot of times, most couples, they have different careers.
Yeah.
Right? Your career is at a desk. You're doing a lot of your consults in place. I'm walking around and moving to places, right? So, and I get to see a bunch of people. And what I have a tendency to do is I like to work out by myself, because I'm around with so many people that I don't want to work out with another 20, 30 people at a time.
Yeah. And that's different for me because I'm all by myself in my work day. And I love to be with others, even if we're not socializing.
Yeah.
I love how that episode was really good and really thorough about trying to figure that out. And that has helped me to realize, oh, yeah, I do like to be around people. I get that energy and I feed off of that, even if we don't talk. I haven't talked to any of the people that I took yoga with this week, but just feeling their presence, being inspired by them, and just having that connection because I'm by myself is a big difference. So I love that, getting coached, but in the way that you need to be coached.
Yeah.
And that can look different, because I don't think you have couples that you necessarily train both, or do you have any?
I've had, and it never works out well.
Yeah.
Because one, I mean, I'm kind of blunted. I'm like, I can't have them do the same program because their needs are different.
Right.
right? But the wife wants nicer legs and abs, and the guy wants amazing arms and wants to lift heavier. It's like it's so different. So I just refuse to train couples,
It's hard to get
right?
in one session,
Yeah,
right?
so
Like, how can you do?
you can, but it's just not, unless it just doesn't work really, really well because their personalities are different.
Mm-hmm.
So now I just refuse to. I was like, hey, like, you guys should be separate. You know that,
Yeah.
right? So, and when you're really upfront and telling them that and explaining them why it's like that,
Mm-hmm.
they're more like, okay, that makes more sense,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the biggest problems that I see. They both join the same gym. One loses a bunch of weight, the other one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the big reason for that is because we didn't address what their type is.
Right.
Right? Maybe they need personal attention and you need group, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's just one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of times is like, you have to know your type. You have to get coached individually. I think that's going to have the greatest impact. Sometimes they both lose weight, which is great,
Mm-hmm.
but I oftentimes find it to be they need something slightly different.
Yeah. And we
Right.
don't even work out together, right? Like, our types
Mm-mm.
are different. So I think that sometimes maybe people see us as a fit couple
Right.
and expecting that we're working out right next to each other,
Yeah, we're doing
high-fiving.
supersets.
We sometimes do. It'll be very few and far between,
Yeah.
but every, few months we'll actually do a workout together, which is fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't do that all the time. That's
Yeah,
very
it
hard
just-
to coordinate. And also, I don't think I would find enjoyment
Yeah.
out of the same types of movements.
That's one of the biggest myths. Couples that train together stay together. That's not true. We don't train
No.
together. In fact, sometimes like you're discouraged a lot of times. Or
Yeah.
maybe I'm discouraged. Like I took a
Bar.
bar class and I was so mad that 2.5s destroyed my body. I was like, I'm never going
No,
back
you
to this
picked up
class.
the 5 pounds.
5 pounds,
The
whatever.
heaviest
Still.
weight that was in the bar class was 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And Royce went right to it. And I said, that's going to be too heavy. And you looked at
He was
me
like, get out of here.
like,
I got this.
what? Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then 200 reps in to our tiny arm circles,
Mhm.
you were kept dropping your arms and you
Yeah.
were looking around at a class of all females, all moms. And you could tell that you
Yeah.
were just so mad about it.
And I couldn't move for 4 days, right?
Yeah.
That should be illegal.
I
You're like,
know.
no 5s allowed on your first day. It should say that on there. And then it goes the other way around. It's like, hey, you want to go do an hour worth of burpees, or you want to do 3 Murphs with me. It's just not.
No,
It's
I
it
don't.
sounds awful, right? So, but I think that's one of the big myths. Couples that train together doesn't necessarily stay together,
No.
right? So find what really fuels what your body type is and what really brings you energy. Because at the end of the day, I think the big question is, did you have fun working out?
Yeah, and would you do it again? It's not sustainable if every time I feel
Yeah.
like my husband needs to drag me to the gym.
Yeah.
And you're like, come on, like, oh no. Like, I want to be motivated myself because I love what I'm doing. Like, you didn't have to
Mhm.
wake me up to go to 5:30 a.m. yoga. I am up and super excited to go.
Yeah.
And that's the sweet spot. You shouldn't have to be pulling one to do it. And so
Mhm.
then you know that there's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect. They just haven't found the right type of exercise that they need to do.
Yeah.
If you find yourself procrastinating going to the gym, I would argue that you haven't found the right gym yet,
100%.
right? Or you haven't found the right trainer yet,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, do that work, do that internal work. If you need help finding that internal work, the link is up top of finding
Yes.
what your type is. And we give you guys the pros and cons to both,
Mm-hmm.
because it should be attractive to you. You should be pulled to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It should feel like you feel weird not doing it.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like when I do my workouts. I feel something's wrong. I want to go towards that. I want to put everything else on the back burner. I want to do my workout.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really, really good feeling.
Yeah. That's sustainable. That's joyful movement.
Mhm.
And it can look different. And so we don't have to also look at each other and say that what you're doing is
Mhm.
not effective. Like, I didn't judge you because you didn't want to go back to bar class. I
Yeah.
obviously was like, you do you and have fun, and you do the same thing for me.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I thought we should bring up too is nutrition coaching.
Yes.
Because right now I'm working for a company called Nourish who accepts all major insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So my patients don't really have to pay anything. It's all done through their insurance. And so what's been
Right.
really interesting since I've been working for Nourish is I have worked with a lot of couples, but individually.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is the wife that signs up first. Sometimes it's the husband that signs up first. I feel like it's whoever kind of found out, wait a second, I can see a dietitian for free.
Yes.
They sign up for it. They start to work with me. And sometimes it's in the first visit, but usually at least by the third visit, they're saying, can my spouse see you too?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, of course.
Right.
And so it's a really good way. I haven't found that any of the couples that I've worked with have had a hard time having that initial conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I've asked them about it too. And they've said, yeah, I just went to them and said, hey, I didn't realize that our insurance offered this, but we can see a dietitian for free. I saw her for 2 times. She was talking to me about a meal plan.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to see her too, she's really cool. And just giving it as an opportunity and not going to that person, that feels, I think, different than when you had brought up like, hey, let's go to the gym together.
Right.
It's like, hey, we get this free thing through insurance. This girl's really cool. She's going to help us meal plan better. We've been talking about coming up with a system for our budgeting and not eating out as much. And she gave me some really good tips. But also, I loved the way I have one male client who went to his wife and said, I think I need you to go because she's telling me all of this stuff and you're the one that's doing the majority of the work in our relationship when it comes to cooking and grocery shopping. Is there any way that you would want to go?
On from a female standpoint, if they said that to me, I'd be excited.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my wife wants to get healthy. I'm about it.
Yeah.
Right. She like that's different from a guy telling that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be a little bit more difficult. I mean, I'm sure it can work too.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has worked for sure, but yeah, like that specifically, when you're coaching both of those, did you coach them the same way or were they way different?
Nope. And that's the best part is that I coach them individually. And yet at the same time, we have a joint goal for them, which is that their family will be healthy together. But I'm working on different things with, when I'm working with the clients, it's so interesting because they have completely different lives, right? Like one couple that I worked with, their jobs were so different. The male, he was in not construction. He actually happened to be in like casino work where he was very active fixing slot machines.
Yep.
And so when we would look at his steps just at work alone, he was getting 8,000 steps. Plus he was like picking up machines, working really heavy. Then the wife was at a desk job and her steps were about 500 to 1,000 per day.
Right.
In that time span. So just completely different 8-hour workday.
Yeah.
And so we had different strategies. And also they were eating different things for lunch. The male was going out to eat because he got some free food at work. The wife had to pack things. So how we navigated what she was going to pack the night before, but also how they could work together. So the husband started to take on some responsibilities of doing some of the grocery shopping, which led to help the wife be able to pack her lunch for the week. So it's like seeing people separately is so important to give them space to be able to talk about what is their specific relationship to food and to exercise. And then how could they come together and create that environment where they're both thriving.
Yeah. I think it gives them space to be themselves.
Yeah.
I'm drawing back because I did train a couple before. And then at one scenario, I remember one of them had to call off and like they were sick, but they still wanted to train.
Yeah.
And I was training a woman so the husband was sick.
Uh-huh.
And then the girl was like, can we focus more on my butt?
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like them saying that with their husband there can feel really weird. But then I was like, of course we can work on that.
Yeah.
Let's just do that all today. Let's do core and let's do legs.
Mm.
I think a lot of times if they're together, they're going to hold back because they feel
100%.
they feel somewhat what do you call it? Subconscious or unconscious
Mhm.
about like I don't want my husband to know that I'm really not confident about this area of my body,
Oh, yes, that's
right?
huge. It actually reminds me of when I wasn't doing virtual visits, when I was in person doing private practice, and I did have some couples who came in,
Yeah.
and I eventually was like, okay, we got to see you separately, because I could tell that the other hard part was that they would kind of like tell on each other,
Yeah.
because I'm like the dietitian and they're trying to, show that they're doing well. And so they would listen to their wife answer about how they ate. And then the husband would throw them under the bus and be like, no, you had potato chips too.
Yeah.
And like just the tension of the
Just feels
person
weird.
wasn't trying to leave that out. They had
Mhm.
actually forgotten that detail. And then hearing that like the spouse had been
Mhm.
like judgmentally watching what they ate and then telling on them
Yeah.
was just kind of a disaster. So it is really important, I think, to have that separately so
Yeah.
that you can gain that confidence and ask for what you need in a safe space, and then know the things that you're going to come together on.
Exactly. That's so good. Okay, so one, create a connection cadence.
Mm-hmm.
That's Oprah session, by the way. Hashtag Oprah. Okay. The second one is create an environment. And then the last one is get coached separately.
Mm-hmm.
So you can lead by example.
100%.
Right. So, okay. So let's give some action plans so we can wrap this up. If they were going to do this on their own, what is the first thing that they should do?
I think the first thing, because it is in the beginning of the month, and maybe when you're watching this, it's not in the beginning of the month, but no matter when it is, trying to introduce the concept of that connection cadence to your partner and saying, when can we get it on the calendar?
Yeah.
Because that will initiate the first part, which is the connection, which is the most important thing.
Yeah. That's it. And we only did it one way, but it needs to go both ways.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. We
So,
only
just
showed
to
the
save some time.
example. Mm-hmm.
So it needs to go both ways for sure. And when you're doing that connection piece, guys, I think it's important to do maybe one or two things. Like focus on one thing that month or two things that month at most
Mm-hmm.
that you can improve and then repeat.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then just really understand that it's always going to be uncomfortable first, especially if you've never done it before.
Right.
It was uncomfortable for us. For now, it's just like drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
It just becomes just like one of my team meetings.
Exactly.
It's like, it just becomes a little bit more natural. In fact, it becomes more exciting because we know the outcome
Is
for the
usually
next
better.
month is better and better. And it's just life is better that way.
Yeah.
Life is lighter and then we get lighter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important for sure. And then the second part is just starting to create that environment.
Yeah. What do you think
Yeah.
was the most impactful thing that we discussed? Where could people start with that?
Deleting.
Yeah.
I think we're in a culture of doing, not in a culture of deleting. So the trimming away creates space to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just delete, put that in your cadence. What's one thing that I can delete today?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to change their entire life. And it's changed mine. It continually changes mine too. And I recommend this to my clients.
Yeah.
Delete something today.
Yep. There's got to be something that you can trim.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no one who's just like, I'm so busy, but
Yeah.
everything is essential.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. That's a myth.
Yeah.
And if anything, we are in overabundance of things that we're putting on our calendar and things that we're buying that we don't need to be buying. And so, yeah.
All of our subscriptions.
All of the subscriptions,
So
all the
many
extra
things.
toys, the clothes, the things that you've bought off of Instagram that you realized you didn't need and has now been just sitting in a cabinet somewhere.
Yeah.
You're not going to use it. Donate it to someone else. Does it bring you joy? Marie
Yeah.
Kondo. If it doesn't, let it go.
So good. And then if you want to exponentially grow this, just get coached.
Exactly.
Right? So yeah, if you need help doing what we just talked about, we'll put some links and subscriptions, descriptions underneath. And you can either get coached by my wife and I or my team.
Yep.
So Guys, if you like this episode, if you haven't done yet, make sure to subscribe. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.